Hello, everyone, and welcome. My name is Akila Z. Richardson, and I'll be kicking off our presentation today. Today, I'm joined by my colleagues, Elizabeth Jean-Baptiste, Amber Burley Munnerlin, and Crystal Stewart. We are just one small part of Cincinnati's African American Black Interpreters Collaborative, also known as CAABIC. CAABIC was founded by two professors out of the University of Cincinnati who could no longer ignore the disparities that African American individuals faced in the sign language interpreting profession. The pair did some research and found that in 2018, RID reported a total of 10,300 interpreters who were certified nationally. And out of that 10,300, only 370 self-identified as Black and African American. That 370 equates to less than 4% of African American Black interpreters certified nationally. While these numbers are shocking, this harsh data solidified the disparities that Elizabeth and Amber suspected. Seeing the numbers side by side placed in this graph made it even more jarring. Initially, Amber felt some sense of pride. After all, she is one of the 370 certified Black interpreters. But that satisfaction quickly changed when she realized she couldn't say the same for most of her African American Black colleagues. If you continue to follow the chart, the numbers continue to get smaller and smaller. And here in the city of Cincinnati, where the population of African American and Black individuals is 43%, we only have 5 Black interpreters, 5 Black certified interpreters. 5 Black certified interpreters locally and 3.6% nationally. This graph was and still is our call to action. We have heard of racial pairing in medical, mental health, and educational settings. However, racial pairing is also essential in the sign language interpreting profession. Research shows Research shows that deaf consumers report they frequently encounter interpreters who believe they are lacking in terms of cultural and linguistic competence and often do not view interpreters as a good fit. If 96% of the interpreting profession is made up of white interpreters, the opportunity for racial pairing is highly unlikely. To not only recruit, promote, and certify more interpreters of color is to further marginalize the Black deaf community. We also examined what little literature was out there about the African American experience as it relates to the sign language interpreting profession. The research is limited, yes, but also wildly revealing about the root causes and the impacts of the racial disparities that exist. The literature focuses on the experience of the African American Black interpreters in 4 categories. Simply about the representation and the needs of representation across the profession, what documentation we see about the Black experience within the curriculum of interpreter education programs, representation of faculty and mentors, as well as issues among colleagues. Our profession's history has been centered around narratives of the racial majority, resulting in systematic marginalization of interpreters of color and African American Black deaf people. The study shaped our needs to imagine something different. Now we need to not only address the needs of Black interpreters, but to deal with the racial microaggressions committed by white colleagues and interpreter educators. We redefined our aims from simply getting more interpreters certified, more Black interpreters certified, to educating the majority of the profession on how to be more anti-racist.
I myself, as a working American Sign Language interpreter over the past 17 years, have experienced a great deal of that isolation, the lack of networking, and the inability to create a critical mass. West Oyedele's research pushed us to think more holistically about issues such as that we as African American Black interpreters face every day. Without that ability to network, to learn, and to gain from one another, we aren't able to create social capital. The social capital that we need through resources and networking gives us the power, the ability, and the capacity to teach cultural competence to our colleagues. With that ability to teach cultural competence, We have the ability to affect positive change in the systems of oppression that we experience in the interpreter education programs as well as out in the interpreting field. The work began by having focus groups. 2 certified deaf interpreters and 3 pre-certified interpreters were interviewed. And with that, we were able to collect data, share the research, and gather information about future contacts. We were also able to understand the realities of what they face on a day-to-day basis on the ground working. We also collected a lot of contact information, and through word of mouth, through email and phone calls, we were able to get a collective list of over 20 plus African American Black interpreters, and that list is still growing. October 26, 2019, we were able to have our first meeting and pull together as a group. About half of the room knew one another, but didn't have contact with each other. So there was no opportunity again for that networking that creates powerful resources for us. The other half of the room had never even met. As we sat and we discussed our experiences and shared our stories, we found similarities in what we had encountered in interpreter education programs as well as out in the interpreting field. Instinctively, we began to encourage, advise, and support one another. Within months, we were galvanized. We decided that as a group, there were several things that we needed to address, and we were able to identify them. We needed to be able to provide training and mentoring opportunities. We sought to create a sense of belonging among our members, where they could receive support, where they could freely discuss and resolve issues they were facing. We wanted to honor the whole person, their individual goals, as well as national certification or whatever their goals were. In doing that, we were sharing resources as well as networking, and we feel it's very important to support the next generation. We have gained leadership positions throughout the profession. We feel that it's important to be able to get access to have more opportunities and inform the changes that we want to see. And we also have been able to meet and educate our colleagues.
Participatory action research is a research paradigm within the social sciences which emphasizes collaborative participation of trained researchers as well as local communities in producing knowledge directly relevant to the stakeholder community. The knowledge produced through participatory action research does not just intend to contribute to the theoretical corpus of the social sciences, but it also inherently contains an agenda of social change. As such, the ends of participatory action research include developing and fostering a participatory model in social science field research, preferring a practical form of knowledge and action to an empirical form of knowledge as statistic, mobilizing local communities to have a concrete role in solving their own problems in an effective and systemic manner, making development policy interventions, advocating for inclusion of local stakeholders, their experiences, forms of understanding, and socioeconomic theory and policy, and attempting to correct power imbalances in knowledge and information flows. When considering participatory action research, we had to think about what can be our impact on the sign language interpreting profession. We came up with 2 questions. How does the Cincinnati African American Black Interpreter Collaborative form as a community of practice? And what, if any, impact does this community of practice have on participants' personal and professional goals, on the community, and on the profession? Elizabeth continuously talked about participatory action research, and I was on the fence because it seemed intimidating. But her perspective was, how do we use the data that we found presented in the earlier slide? How do we move feelings into facts? And then how do we take the data and pair it with lived experience? At the core of participatory action research, at the core of the agenda of participatory action research is social change, which that's what I could get on board with. There are challenges to being a university community partnership, not necessarily efficient on the front end, but you definitely get more buy-in. Additionally, coming from a corporate background, I wanted to design it and just run the program. But through participatory action research, Elizabeth kept reminding me it's about the collective design, always trying our best to bring it back to the community for the collaborative to own it. So as a whole, the collaborative, we made decisions together, formed a collective, gathered information, and decided what we needed as individuals and as a subset group, how we were going to address the issues we saw and explore what parts of the profession did not apply to the African American or Black interpreter experience. There are programs across the country that aim to serve Black sign language interpreters. However, the Cincinnati African American Interpreter Collaborative is a distinctly different group in that, or distinctly different in our approach out in the field, because we are a self-sustaining, local community-based collaborative. St. Catherine's is university-centered. Randleman, through the Rochester Institute of Technology, is national, employment-based, and university-centered. Project Climb is a national specialization for those who are already certified, and again, university-centered.
In terms of theoretical frameworks, we were looking at, again, how does CAABIC form as a community of practice, being something different than has traditionally been done in our field. So we looked at the domain, what we cared about, which again was this idea of disparity that was not only felt, but now seen through the numbers. And we looked to make those numbers change. Who cares about it? Originally, it was this community of 25 individuals, now 30, 35, growing every day. But really at the helm is our leadership team, comprised of 6 individuals who are representative of certified, not certified, new to the profession, and have been in the profession for a long period of time, as well as representation from where they work, some working in video relay services, some working in education, and other venues that are pretty common in our field. And then the practice came down to those aims that Crystal had presented on. Those were identified in day 1, and then were refined and reshaped during the strategic plan that they engaged in the fall of 2020, just very recently. Communities of practice say that we need to form around a common purpose. Again, it's this actively address the disparities representation, and then doing that through a critical mass and providing opportunities that cultivate equity and inclusion. So coming around a common purpose, moving through that into stages of trust. Those have been part of the story and documented in terms of challenges that have been brought to the group. And then sharing knowledge. For example, we have these work groups where we share knowledge about professional development opportunities, research practices, access to university resources that are even available to the public, even without university representation, so that they can leverage those in a more sustainable way on their own. We develop shared practices among how we communicate with each other and work, which is on a weekly, actually twice a week now, increased communication all the time among these partners. And we create a collective intelligence. For example, we are all learning how to do grant writing or learning strategies for program development, which maybe are considered soft skills, but actually have been sort of things that we're learning under those explicit aims that we're getting at. We're actually building our own toolbox in a lot of ways. The implications of this research is that in the short term, we are filling a gap for those students who are experiencing microaggressions in their interpreter education programs and in the field. And we're also actively creating structures for colleges and universities to turn to in order for us to help them become more anti-racist. In the long term, we're hoping that those programs themselves don't need an institution like CAABIC to take the reins and make that okay for them. So in the short term, doing the education and the foundation building so that we can have increased representation in faculty of color, and then increased representation of practitioners and students of color. How we're documenting how CAABIC is forming as a community of practice is through this timeline, documenting the key points in that development. And then we can say tangibly that we are making a marked difference on the personal and professional outcomes for the community, for the profession, and for the individual. And we've actually had one of our members get certified in the past year, increasing our numbers from 5 to 6 certified Black interpreters in the Greater Cincinnati area, which is a 20% increase. We are also waiting on test results for another 4 individuals and sending another 2 up for their own assessments in educational interpreting in the next 6 months. Thank you very much. We appreciate your time and attention, and turn it over to any questions you may have. Thank you.